Hey, everybody. Welcome to week 209. It's good to see you out of one eye. Yes. I watched last week, even though it was the day after surgery, and One Eye Willie. I like One Eye Willie, the white wildcat, but it's Willie is Willie the Wildcat, not Willy the pirate. So anyway, you're too funny. So we're thrilled to have Ryan Walker with Shumaker. He's up on Capitol Hill. And so, you wonder where Cliff Clavin, Jack Santinello gets all of his scoop. It's from Ryan. So we'll talk about that, and we'll introduce, and we definitely want to hear directly from you, like, all right, this tax cliff is like no joke. And Adam's been beating that drum for a while, strumming that chord, I should say. I'm the drum beater, but he's got his Fender back there ready to rock and roll. Before we tip it over to Ryan, Jack, you had something I think that you wanted to talk about. Is that correct?
Yeah, so something that I found, I think it was in one of the either the business journal or one of the other things that many of us get on a daily basis. So the article was called Connecting NC Small Businesses to the World. And yes, in continuing on with the Cliff Clavin tradition, I do have some facts to share with you that are not sourced from me nor from Ryan. But so there was this gathering in Raleigh of the North Carolina Minority Business Development Association and the Small Business Cyber Alliance, and they're launching this export initiative, and the RTI Institute, so Research Triangle Institute, is involved. So you have a lot of different private and public organizations coming together to do this. So the reason why I want to share this is there's some quick facts that were put out by North Carolina and the U.S. Treasury, which is in 2023, North Carolina exported a record 42.2 billion of goods to the world. Now we're talking about exports outside of the country. In 2021, exports from North Carolina supported an estimated 128,000 jobs. We were the 14th largest state exporter for goods in 23. 40 billion of manufactured products were sent out in 23. And in comparison to 2021, I don't know why 22 is skipped, but 116,000 jobs. So that's up to 128,000 jobs. Goods exported accounted for 5.5 of the North Carolina GDP in 2023, and this is the latest available. So again, reason for sharing that is to throw some statistics out there, but to also encourage those of you who are thinking about or have the ability or capability to do exports, but are feeling like, okay, wait a minute, that's too much to take on. There is guidance and even more guidance now to be able to look into the possibility of exporting your goods to outside of the country. Obviously, there's all kinds of regulations with regard to exports, et cetera. So, but again, just wanted to share that because I thought it was very interesting. The numbers are higher than I would have thought. Just kind of, I didn't know, but my perception was obviously inaccurate that North Carolina is doing really well about taking stuff that is made here and shipping it outside of the country. So we'll leave it at that. And then, if you want me to introduce Ryan really quickly, and then he can take on the role of telling you all of the fun stuff, actual or rumored to be occurring on Capitol Hill. But Ryan is a partner and good friend. So we have, and I've mentioned this before, this adjunct or kind of arm of the firm. It is a separate entity, but it's called Shumaker Advisors. And Ryan can tell you more about that and be more accurate than what I could say about it. But it's been so beneficial to have Ryan and his team be together with us on things that facing our clients, but just also general knowledge. And, we joke around about it, but a lot of the times when I bring to you information, it's because Ryan has and his team has sent out information about whatever the topic is to the entire firm. And so, all of you have been the beneficiary of Ryan's work and his relationships at Capitol Hill. And I've said before about this, and I don't think it's an exaggeration, that Ryan and his team, I mean, they got street cred. They can walk into the Capitol building whenever they want, and they know everybody in there. So, it is a wonderful benefit to have Ryan here with us to hear it directly rather than filtered through me as to the ongoings, and then specifically what we're going to talk about with the tax cliff. So, Ryan, if you want to share a little bit more about yourself and about advisors, and then launch into the true and the rumors of what's ongoing on Capitol Hill these days.
Yeah, thanks, Jack. I appreciate the opportunity to be here, and thank you, Adam and Gary. Look, I'm here in Washington, D.C. I have two other partners that are here with me, Jason Wime and Chris Salemi. We're a bipartisan firm. We cover both sides of the political aisle, both chambers of Congress, as well as the executive branch agencies in the White House. So we have a number of clients that we're helping here on the lobbying government affairs side. We range everywhere from the energy sector to nonprofits, as well as tech and telecommunications and beyond. So we have broad reach. And my background, just very briefly, is I worked 14 years on Capitol Hill. I was chief of staff to Congressman Bob Latta from Ohio. Congressman Latta is on the House Energy and Commerce Committee. And then after leaving Capitol Hill, I worked 5 years as an in-house lobbyist for a small company called BP. And then in 21 started Shumaker Advisors, their full-time didn't start Shumaker Advisors, but I started their Washington office, full-time Washington office, and then brought Jason and Chris on to partner with me here. So that's just kind of the background of the firm, and just kind of a brief note on current events. Look, the House and the Senate are both out this week on recess. Both will come back in next week after this Memorial Day recess. They'll come in for about the next 3 or 4 weeks until they take a short break on over July or over July 4th, and then be in all the entire month of July. So these next probably 8 weeks are pretty critical for Congress, because it's the majority in the House. The Republicans want to get through every appropriations bill for the fiscal year 25 process prior to going out on their extended August recess. That may be a bit of a pipe dream. But and then in the Senate as well, we'll be back trying to process their appropriations bills, as well as we're likely to see sometime in the next 8 weeks a joint address to Congress by the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu. And so we have obviously the ongoing Israel-Hamas conflict that's top of mind. Obviously, the presidential election and all elections. This is an election year, but a presidential election year. Those are continuing to be ongoing. You have jury deliberations going right now with the Trump hush money trial, quote hush money trial. That those jury deliberations could come back in a matter of hours or days, who knows? Your folks are just kind of gearing up for the post Labor Day crush of all politics all the time. So North Carolina, where you all are, it will be a pivotal state for the presidential race, and you have a governor's race that's ongoing right now. So you're going to see nothing but political ads. So God bless you. Um, and so that is, and then obviously the other one of the other must do's is the National Defense Authorization Act. So a lot of this the process of Congress will move forward a bit slowly. And there's likely to be, depending upon the outcome of the elections, there could be a busy lame duck session, post-election session of Congress. But that may not include funding the government, because there's rumor that there will be a continuing resolution to fund the government at the FY24 levels until maybe January or February of next year. Some members of the conservative faction of the Republican House are pushing for that in the hopes that they'll have more leverage should President Trump be reelected to a second term. So that's kind of the broad spectrum of where Congress is now. And the administration, you look at any agency, whether it's Department of Energy, EPA, Treasury, they're trying to pump out as many regulations as they can before. So there's a thing called the Congressional Review Act that prior to, there's a 60 legislative day cutoff, that anything passed before that isn't susceptible to a Congressional Review Act resolution by Congress, and that everything that is after that is susceptible to a Congressional Review Act. And then in a CRA resolution in Congress, for those who aren't aware, basically it would take a particular the kind of elementary version of this is it takes a particular regulation, it nullifies it through a simple majority in both the House and the Senate, and then the president would also ultimately have to sign it. The president could veto it, but they were, if it was passed, then it would nullify that regulation. The agency it not only nullifies that regulation, but it prohibits the regulatory agency from issuing another regulation or anything that is substantially similar to that. So that's where the battle is now. And that cutoff date is either projected toward the end, it is the end of May. So somewhere toward the end of May or maybe beginning of June. So all of the agencies right now are trying to pump out as many of these final regulations as possible. That's that's kind of the quick and dirty of what's going on in the government.
That was the adult version of Schoolhouse Rock, and I was thinking that we should have had that as our logo for this week's webinar. But okay, so thank you for that, Ryan. It's awesome. All right, so where do you want to go, Gary? You want to just jump into what the regulations, or Adam? Yes, please.
Yeah, I think maybe if you could provide some color, Ryan, about how we got to where we're at with the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, and what's going away, and kind of maybe run down like, hey, likely scenario if down path A, likely scenario down, path B, if you can. Because that what we've been trying to tell people is like, as best as we can, what to prepare for in sort of either scenario, with the as Gary will attest to and Jack will attest to, I'm a libertarian, so I don't like anybody.
I don't know that I would
yeah,
given their libertarian candidate that they just voted, I don't know that I would explain that.
And I can't, I mean, we need to stop trying to win national elections, win some local elections. But what we try to tell people, a Democrat will raise a rate, a Republican will just take something away without telling you and lower your rate. But it's the same answer, at the end of the day. So what, and I just read an article earlier today that just talked about, what were the benefits that were received as part of the 2017 Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. And it's funny because, like, the income, of the income of, the typical Shumaker client, typical BGW client, which is going to be, mid-sized business owner, pretty decent AGI. Doesn't feel like it, because it's not like you're taking that home. But their benefit seems to have been about 10%, when you factor everything in between the qualified business income deduction and everything else, which is sort of in line with what we've been telling people. If it goes away, count on, between 7 and 10%, between, just preferences that are going away and stuff like that, which, kind of sucks. Like, that's not a bill that I was, as a US citizen, I realize, okay, I understand the relationship between this and the federal deficit. As the guy actually having to write the check, I want it to be someone else. So that was a combination of a question and a tirade, that's in there, Ryan. If you could address that as a neutral third party that Jack brought in to counter my bullshit.
Well, look, we tell clients, look, we deal here in Shumaker Advisors and in Washington, we deal with the 4 Ps: the people, the process, the politics, and the policy. And so, I mean, the policy is typically, look, we're there to advocate for the policy that our clients hire us to advocate for. But the people, the politics, and the process are what determine the outcomes in Washington. And right now, you're looking at the table is set with about 6 principles that will that have already started the process of negotiating what the the tax package would look like. Well, at least maybe not negotiating what it'll look like, at least starting the process of gathering input and learning more. You have the Senate Finance Committee and the House Ways and Means Committee are the 2 committees that will drive this effort on Capitol Hill. You have Ron Wyden from Oregon, Democrat from Oregon, who is the chairman of the Senate Finance Committee, who will lead the efforts in the Senate. And and will he lead that going forward? That's to be determined by the outcome of the elections. If the Republicans win the Senate and take back control, Mike Crapo from Idaho, who's the current ranking member on the committee, will kind of take the reins on what the package will look like. Both, as you can imagine, have diametrically different positions on tax policy. In the House, you have Republican Chairman Jason Smith from Missouri, and you have ranking member Richie Neal from Massachusetts, who also have diametrically different opinions on what tax policy should like. And then there's a subcommittee below that. In the Senate, it's the Subcommittee on Taxation and Oversight, or an IRS oversight, and it's just called Subcommittee on Tax in the House. So you have a chairman and a ranking member on each of those subcommittees as well that will be part of the process. But what does this look like? Look, I think ultimately this is, as I said before, will be determined by the outcome of the election and the level of acrimony between the parties after the election. Look, we're not going to know the outcome of the election on election night. That doesn't happen anymore because of litigation and late votes and everything like that. But Steve Scalise, the House Majority Leader, has said publicly that, look, if there is a Republican trifecta where they have the House, the Senate, and the White House, that House Republicans intend to utilize the budget reconciliation process to utilize that to run the 2017 tax cuts through and essentially reauthorize them all. And he's said that they'll do that in the first 100 days of a new Trump administration. So ambitious, but look, if there's a Republican trifecta, that's absolutely possible. So, and then you also have the politics, at least preliminarily, the Congressional Budget Office has come out and said, well, reauthorizing these 2017 TCJA tax cuts will increase budget deficits by, I think, $3.3 trillion over a period of 10 years, or 9 or 10 years. So, you have, and you have that driving the process, as well as just the kind of standard political talking points. Look, Democrats want to raise your taxes, Republicans want to lower your taxes. Democrats want to increase taxes on corporations and high wage earners, and Republicans want to broaden the base, and I think that's one of the comments that people have talked about as success stories for the 2017 cuts, is that, look, it lowered rates, but it broadened the base, and it actually brought in more revenue, according to some folks. I'm not an economist, so I can't say that's true or not. So that's kind of the politics behind it, and the process. As I said, if there's a Republican trifecta, they can utilize budget reconciliation. They'll use that to they'll pass the tax. They'll package that, the 2017 cuts, and they'll probably include a bunch of other things in this as well, because budget reconciliation, all it needs is a simple majority. It's not subject to the 60 vote threshold in the Senate. So if this Republican trifecta, they'll take the 2017 tax cuts. They may take a piece of some energy policy, and whatever else they want to throw into this package, and run it through the House and the Senate and have the president sign. So that's kind of the lay of the land, at least from a macro level.
So I'm assuming you're an Ohio guy. Is that correct?
Born and raised Ohio, but I've lived in DC, work out here. I've lived out here for 22 years.
Okay, cool. I don't know how, like, I did 13 winters in Chagrin Falls, Ohio, and I appreciate the people of Ohio. Like, they're just grounded. How in the world are you dealing with the craziness of Washington, D.C. for 20 years, man?
You gotta love it. I mean, you really do. It's a lot of people. It's just like having a background in energy policy. I tell people, I talk to a lot of engineers, and I'm like, look, you all have spent your careers, designing wells, drilling wells, building companies. I've spent a career understanding what oftentimes people believe is not understandable, and that is politics in the government. Because when, it's not, Jack mentioned Schoolhouse Rock, but that is completely not how a bill becomes a law. Let's be very clear. So
What?
yeah, no, it's
You're messing with me, man. I thought I knew.
It's a lot of times people don't really know how the sausage is made, and it can be unseemly, but it's the best form of government in the world, and we're the best country in the world, and you have to love doing this. And what I love doing is I love helping people, helping clients navigate the morass that is the federal government.
Yeah, well, it is a morass, that's for sure. We got a great question coming in here from John. He says, any thoughts on where SCOTUS will rule in the Loper Bright Enterprises versus Raimundo Relentless Incorporated v. Department of Commerce? This is a case that could overrule the Chevron doctrine. Do you think that the court will continue to allow deference to federal agencies?
I think the Supreme Court is going to kick Chevron deference to the curb.
Interesting.
I think that is a significant point, because if I'm correct, and the Supreme Court does get rid of Chevron deference, because a number of the justices have been targeting this, in small ways, over the years. And look, I'm not a lawyer either, but I just the politics of the court of the Supreme Court are fascinating as well. But they've taken small steps to get rid of Chevron, and I think they'll do it this time. And that opens up kind of Pandora's box for litigation and new rulemaking processes and opportunities to lobby and engage the federal government as to what companies and other organizations want to see in regulations and laws. And it actually will force on another point, it'll actually force Congress to be more detailed in their lawmaking, which isn't a bad thing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what do you, is it okay if I hop back in, Gary?
Yeah, please.
All right. So, what do you guys, I'm going to try to ask this in a polite way.
Big.
Well, I'll have two questions.
Okay.
Oh
So,
boy, we're all holding our breath. Go
yeah, I know.
ahead.
So question number one, it's kind of, and they're both related, and Jack's like, just get it out. A lot of people that are elected officials, look, I've been throwing it out there, but 75%, seem like they're actually very intelligent people, went to Harvard, people that, but otherwise sound like idiots, when you hear them. So when it comes to, entitlements, by that Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, you always, we're going after it. People taking advantage of the system, blah, 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 we're blah, blah. But then I'm never going to cut your benefits, or I'm never, blah. It's a tax that's taken from me and Gary to then fund some future benefit. So when you hear people talking like that, they actually do know that you cannot collect the tax from me and then cut the benefit in the future, right? They're, it's pretty damn close to revenue neutrality, right. At this point. So when you hear BS like that, is it nod, wink, wink? What are people actually thinking when they say dumb stuff like that?
They're thinking politically.
Yeah.
And the federal government is an institution that, Congress is an institution that likes the path of least resistance, and it also doesn't like to move unless it's forced to do so. So when you talk about entitlements and other large programs, either reforming them or ending them or whatever it is, the likelihood of anything happening until they absolutely have to do something is unlikely. They may play around the edges, but when it comes to wholesale reform, that's not going to happen until their hand is forced one way or another. And that's just, I don't know, that's not a combination of it. That's just reality.
Yeah. And I mean, it seems like there's not a boatload of opposition to, for me and Jack, just raise our retirement age a little bit. Why is it so complicated to get something like that done, just to put the issue to bed?
Because politics.
Okay.
Politics drives, and I'm not trying to be cute. But,
that's just so dumb. I volunteer, raise my retirement age by 1 year. I'm good. I'm gonna have to be freaking working anyway.
And it's politics. It's every 2 years is an election cycle for the House. Yeah. Every 6 years is an election cycle for a United States senator, and every 4 years for the White House. So and people say, "Oh, term limits." Well, term limit, we already have term limits, and they're called elections. So I think, but when folks are trying to get reelected, when the media, when they're also trying to navigate the media, a 24-hour news cycle, there's more of an incentive to be hyperbolic with your comments in the media, because it drives politics, and politics will forever drive policy.
Yeah. So then I guess somewhat related, I mean, just the data shows that there is limited relationship between tax cuts and economic growth. So what, like, it, how about just a recognition of like, look, you know, if we're going to spend this much, we got to bring in this much. You know, like, yeah, it's like basic math, right, Gary? You know, doesn't matter who's in charge, you know, spend this much, got to bring in this much, you know, otherwise it creates a deficit, period. You know, like, I don't know why this is rocket science, you know, to anybody. But what, I guess, what do you, like, what actually would it take? You know, like, I guess, what would it take for something like the Simpson Bowles proposal to actually go, you know, somewhere, in the sense that, like, look, without like radical cuts, you know, that seems to be a practical answer, that subsequently everybody, you know, sort of pretended like it never happened.
Look, I think I think it would take the political makeup of Congress, both the House and the Senate, that are aligned with that, to move that. But it's, you know, look, at the end of the day, you know, the electorate is moved, you know, in daily news cycles, and members of Congress, to their credit, are doing yeoman's work trying to keep up with all of the issues that they're tasked with keeping up with. You know, they and their staff are taking meetings every day, all day, in 15 or 20-minute increments, with constituents, with, you know, businesses, you know, their own political meetings. So they're trying to understand all of these issues very quickly. And I think that, you know, it's like you threw this up for me to hit out of the park here, you know, and that's like where folks like Shumaker Advisors come in, and, you know, companies are hiring us to stay in front of and on top of all of these issues for them, because oftentimes we help companies, you know, small, medium-sized companies, they don't have the budgets, the internal budgets, to have internal government affairs teams or regulatory experts. So we're staying you know, on top of that forum and in front of members and in front of staff on a daily and weekly basis, to keep their issues fresh, to move the ball down the field for them, to get some kind of, you know, either push something good or stop something bad.
So we got a question in from Robert. Robert, good to see you down in Florida. And he says, hey, I hear Biden has worked mining deals with Canada. We appear to be moving away from China as a trading partner. What's the feeling in DC regarding China?
Yeah, there's definitely that's one of the bipartisan efforts in Congress. You know, they, at the beginning of this Congress, they created what they called the Select Committee on China, on the Chinese Communist Party, and so there's this effort to move away from China, to reshore a lot of these business entities, whether it's pharmaceuticals, whether it's manufacturing, and that permeates both Republicans and Democrats, Biden and Trump. They both have their kind of, you know, unique ways of doing it. But I think that regardless of who gets elected this fall, or who has control of Congress, that issue will continue to move forward, to try and separate ourselves as much as possible from China.
So another, Joe, you're on fire today, man. Joe says, what's the probability that cannabis will become the law of the land? He's asking for a friend.
I think I think they've made, Biden has recently announced that, they'll reclassify cannabis to a different, I don't know the numbers of a different class of drug. There's been an effort to do banking reform in the House and the Senate, so that the cannabis stores and things like that can process credit cards and all these and take out loans and do whatever else. But it being the complete law of the land, I think is a ways away. I would say 5 or 10 years away at least.
So Ryan, if you want to go through, so we can keep our promise to, what we put out there as being, the tax cliff, and go over the things that, are on kind of like on the laundry list with respect to the different things that, bonus depreciation and all those other things, just so we get that in, and then we can go back to the more fun stuff. But I want to make sure that we cover that.
Yeah, there's there was a bill, HR 7024, that has passed the House to deal with three of the provisions that will expire at the end of next year. Still hasn't passed the Senate, still pending in the Senate. Doubt they'll get to it. If they do, it won't be until lame duck. But that's the deduction for domestic R&D expenses, the EBITDA standard for deducting business interest expenses, and the 100% bonus depreciation. So that has passed the House, waiting in the Senate. But there's a number of other provisions that I'm not as familiar with, but will also expire, come the end of next year. It's provisions governing the tax treatment of certain business expenses and investment costs, 20% deduction in qualifying pass-through business income, provisions to maintain competitive international tax code, including those affect the base erosion and anti-abuse tax, foreign derived intangible income, and global intangible low taxed income. Estate and gift tax, that's obviously a big deal for a lot of folks who have big investments or real estate portfolios. Also, the lower individual income tax rates, the higher standard deduction, the expanded child tax credit, higher alternative minimum tax phase-out thresholds, those will all reset at the end of next year. And the expanded health insurance premium tax credits will also expire. Those are just a few of the more real and tangible, both for businesses and individuals, that will expire at the end of next year, if not reauthorized.
So is it possible and a possibility that okay, get around to December 31st and they put a Band-Aid on it and say, okay, we're going to, keep the status quo as it is for the next 3 months, so that we can get through the inauguration and State of the Union and all this other stuff, and kick the can down the road like they do for many things like budgets and funding and everything else?
That's a complete possibility, to have a short-term extension. They do, I think it's every year, every other year, they do a tax extender package that, has a bunch of odds and ends, put into it for businesses largely. And I think some individual tax provisions as well that are put into that. And those are reauthorized for another year, another 2 years, whatever it is. So they may take this because they won't have an agreement by the end of next year. I can guarantee it. They could say, look, we'll do a 3-month extension, 6-month extension, whatever it is, while they continue to work on them. And as I said, part of the players and the process to this have begun the process to figure out what both parties want. For instance, both House Ways and Means Republicans and the Senate Finance Republicans have put together working groups, or they call tax teams, for different sectors of the economy to look at what they can do with tax policy going into this tax cliff. There's 10 teams in the House, and they're all led by a different Ways and Means Committee member, and those are broken down by industry. And you have an American manufacturing team, working families team, American workforce, a Main Street team, new economy. I have no idea what that means. Rural America, community development, supply chains, U.S. innovation, and global competitiveness. And each one of those teams has about 4 or 5 members, Republican members on it. The Senate is doing something very similar. I don't believe they've announced yet what their teams are and who will be on them, but those will be Republicans from the Senate Finance Committee.
So if I could impose upon you further to get us a little bit deeper on the things that are on the edge of the cliff. So if you were to pick the top 2 things from a business owner's perspective, and then from a personal income perspective, and obviously those are going to be interrelated, for a middle market company, what would you say are the top 2 things, 2 issues in each of those columns, and what are the repercussions of not continuing or the reset? Either way you want to look at it, the good or the bad kind of thing, continuation of the good, the implementation of the bad, for those kind of 4 things, 2 on each side.
Yeah, I think from an individual perspective, look, I mean, the individual rates, as well as the standard, the increase in the standard deduction, it will become, if the increase in the standard deduction goes away, it ostensibly becomes harder to do your taxes, and if you're, on the income rates, they reset, I think they reset to the higher rate, so your taxes are going to go up. I think somewhere it's said that under the Tax Cut and Jobs Act, the average family of 4 is saving about $2,000 in taxes a year, and if they were to go away, that would that's essentially a tax increase on a family of 4 of about $2,000, if not more. And on the business side, look, you have the R&D expenses. I hear a lot from clients and folks in different sectors of the economy that our business is driven by research and development. We're constantly driving money and revenue back into the business to stay ahead of the competition. And it's either for some size of companies, it's either too difficult or too cumbersome to take advantage of that tax credit, or it going away could cause a decrease in reinvestment, in U.S. reinvestment. I'm not talking about just a particular company. We're talking about industries here. The medical industry, pharmaceutical industry, manufacturing. Those reinvestment dollars going back into the company, could drop, to a certain extent. Obviously, they're not going to drop. They likely won't drop dramatically. But then again, you have this tension with, do we reinvest here in America, or do we reinvest in some place like China? So you have this tax policy lining up with global competitiveness as well. So I think maybe I went down a rabbit hole. Sorry, did I answer your question?
Oh,
Yeah,
that's good.
yeah, absolutely. All right, so I'm going to ask you a potentially nonpartisan question, but let me frame it. And ultimately, I'm going to ask you for your opinion of the outcome of the election, but more so, how did we get to this point? The people that I talk to, just generally speaking, and I don't like to talk a lot about politics, but when it does, that conversation does happen, it seems like a common theme is, how did we get to this place where really when we vote in November, it's a vote against someone rather than a vote for someone? It's it's like, okay, how do we end up with these 2 people, these 2 individuals being the top candidates for the respective parties, regardless of whether you are affiliated with one party or the other or independent? It seems like that is a common theme that, okay, wow, this is where we're at, you know, greatest country in the world, and these are our options. So again, I sort of feel that way. I'm like, kind of like, okay, well, you know, really, can we not do better just for ourselves, kind of thing? But I wanted to share that and then ask you the question, you know, what do you think? What are you hearing on either side, and kind of like what your thoughts are on the election and what would influence things one way or another based on what's going on right now? That, let's say, all these, you know, regulations and everything that are being pushed through, if they get pushed through, is that going to sway one, you know, a voter one way or another? So how to kind of bring it all together. But ultimately my question is, how did we end up here?
So that's a very big question, and has tentacles that can go everywhere. So I'm going to try and simplify it as much as I can, and to say that, look, how we ended up here is a combination of the political party decentralization, as well as a 24-hour media news cycle. And you know, when I started on the Hill in 2002, early 2002, there was still largely party centralization. People relied on the National Republican Congressional Committee, the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, to help them raise money, help them run their campaigns, and there were benefits to that for party leaders, to cut people off, to, you know, things like that, that created a greater cohesion amongst members of the same party. Now, some people would say, well, that's bad. Some people would say, well, no, it's not. Look, I'm not drawing a conclusion here. I'm just saying it's different. And that combined with members, that decentralization led people to go out and raise money from, you know, in the increments of $25, $100, you know, $250 from people all over the country. So you have elections that were centralized in a congressional district, in a district which has now become more nationalized because people, but to drive those donations, to drive that kind of attention, you have to get in the media. You have to be involved in the media. So you have those two playing into each other. But also, it's, you know, a lot of folks in Congress, when I started on the Hill, members of Congress, they came from the quote farm team. They worked their way up through the, you know, local and county elected offices, to state legislatures, and then to Congress, where they learned the system, right? Again, not drawing a conclusion on this, just different. Where now you have a lot of people not coming from that quote farm team. You have a lot of people coming directly from business, from you know, whatever walk of life, you know, media personality, whatever, that are getting elected and don't necessarily know, you know, which levers to pull in the government. So and it's oftentimes easier to criticize than it is to govern. And we're seeing that now. No, I think both parties have this problem where it's much much more difficult to govern than it is to be critical of the other side. It's much easier to do that, right? But let me do. I sound very cynical and I sound very like downtrodden. But let me just say, look, this is people who don't experience Washington like myself and Jason and Chris, you know, do every day. This is 99% of House members and Senate members and people who work in the government are here to help, want to help, love to serve, want to help their country. And all people really see is that 1%, because they're the ones that end up in the media. Yeah. And that's what frames, you know, most people now, there's some statistic out there that most people get their news from the ticker at the bottom of CNN or Fox News or whatever. That's where most people get their news. There in Twitter, or X or whatever it's called now. But they're not diving into the news. They have their own lives to live. So I think what they're seeing creates a perception that Washington is broken. It's more partisan than ever. People don't want to work together. And that couldn't be further from the truth. People do want to work together, but there's the media and everything else that are just kind of in the way.
That's a very interesting perspective, because I wouldn't have the numbers for me, my perception would not have been 99-1. I mean, it would have been, obviously much different. And that's to your point. And I've said many times on this program that, Fox News is 114, MSNBC is 116 on XM. All you have to do is take the same story and flip the two channels, and you wouldn't believe that you're listening to the same story, the same core story, because of the spin on it. And so so I believe that, okay, yeah, it is the media, and it's us allowing ourselves to get sucked into that perspective without keeping an open mind many times. And, we just kind of go down.
The media loves Donald Trump. I mean, because without Donald Trump, what the hell else would they talk about?
Right.
I mean, when Donald Trump goes away, they're not going to know what to do to sell ads.
Excellent.
Yeah. So
what other questions does the group have? I mean, I know, well, there's one person in particular. He's very politically in one direction. So Mr. G, this is your opportunity to ask questions without consequent. Well, I shouldn't say that. I may have to chat with you offline depending on what you ask, but yeah, feel free. I mean, Ryan is awesome. He, again, he said that on both sides, and it's interesting. So I'll tell you a quick little story. Last time they were in town, we were at dinner, and it was, okay, I asked a very politically charged question, knowing that I had someone that was slanted a little more to the right, and one person is a little slanted a little more to the left, and just hearing what they had to say, more so to see how they collaborate with each other, and not because they had, we'd been maybe drinking a few drinks. And so it was appropriate to say, that's just a dumbass thing to say or position to take, but they didn't. They were very collegial despite being in a trusted environment. So, please feel free to ask questions. We have a few more minutes left, but, Gary, Adam, if you guys have any questions as well.
Yeah. So this is for you, Ryan, and it's actually a favor that I want you to do. I want you to go to the Senate, and one of my pledge brothers, who I had to tie his stinking tie every Sunday because he didn't know how to freaking tie his tie. He was 2 years older than me. He was transferring, ran track for Kansas State University, but his name is Roger Marshall. So tell him, hey, for me, and tell him, hey, I met your pledge brother who used to tie your tie on Sundays.
What fraternity were you in?
Beta Theta Pi.
Okay. My business partner, Jason Wimay, is actually very close with Senator Marshall. So we'll definitely tell them.
Yeah, you do. Please do. Roger is a good guy, became an OBGYN and served our country as well. Like he's a good guy. His dad was chief of police in El Dorado, Kansas, part of the, we swam against them and played against them. So anyway.
I guess the question that I've got, Ryan, is that just so we can kind of have a historical reference, like on the one hand, I could say, wow, has it ever been, functional, because somebody got beaten with a cane on the Senate, back in like the 1840s, right? So it's like, that's not good.
One was actually shot at as well.
Yeah. So yeah. Andrew Jackson actually got shot in a duel before he then shot somebody else and killed him. Yeah. So I can say, well, it's never been functional. At the same time, with Bill Clinton and Newt Gingrich, we actually had a balanced budget. So if you were to kind of put your thumb on like, hey man, if we could just get back to people like this, You like what in your mind is kind of the last time, you know, Jack asked the question, how do we get to this? I'd ask kind of a related question of like, when was the last time, in y'all's opinion, you know, we can wax nostalgic and say it actually seemed functional, you know, meaning disagreements, but not only was it functional, but the data supported that it was functional in the sense of economic progress without massive freaking deficits and interest rates and, you know, all that other BS, you know, associated with it.
Look, I think that in terms of
you can say never too.
no, I don't think that at all. I think from a historical point, you had two people that vehemently disagreed with each other's policies, but still found a way to work together. Were then Speaker John Boehner and President Obama. And I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility again. I think, look, you know, I think it's difficult, and this may come off, well, it will come off the wrong way. But I think it's difficult to work with President Biden because I think he's declining a bit. And, you know, a lot of the staff has the power in the White House. I'm not saying he's senile or anything. I just, look, you're 80 years old. You know, it happens when you get older. And so I think, you know, as we look toward, you know, what the 2028 elections, I think from a presidential standpoint, I think both parties will be looking to younger candidates, and I think that, you know, they'll have the energy to kind of do a few rounds in the boxing arena, right? And that's what's great about Washington. That's what's great about our government is it's built on negotiation. You know, it's all Ronald Reagan used to say, and I'll butcher this, like, if you're my friend 80, you know, if you're with me 80% of the time, you're my friend. You know, and you can live to fight another day. No one understands the lost art of incrementalism I think will come back. The pendulum swings both ways, and it will come back.
All right, so here's a hot potato question from Robert. With NATO and Russia escalating the battle, do you politicians in DC believe we're at the beginning of World War III?
I don't think so. I think that, you know, we have, no matter which party, I think that we have great folks in the diplomatic corps around the world who work tirelessly to keep us out of conflicts. Now, there are a lot of knuckleheads around the world that want to cause problems for us. And I think so far we've done a good job of doing that. Now, one thing I will say, look, you know, our greatest ally, one of our greatest allies in the world is Israel. We need to continue to back them and keep them safe. And because without them, you know, who knows what happens in the Middle East. So that's something that we need to stay steadfast on despite the ongoing outrage.
So Joe, who has been a regular on here for probably 209 weeks of the 209 weeks that we've been doing this, he says, Ryan, you are a breath of fresh air about our government. So thank you. I wanted you to see that.
Thank you.
Also, John says, you mentioned the pendulum swinging back to favor political parties finding ways to work together. What needs to happen to increase the chances for bipartisanship?
I think you're starting to see some of that now, because you know, look, I'm a Republican. I'm a conservative Republican, right? That's you know, in Washington, you wear the letter behind your name. You either have an R or D, right? I have the R. But you're starting to see some of that pendulum swing, with some of the progressive policies that people are starting to push back on. And I think, time is probably all you really need to push this in a certain direction, because eventually people get tired of both sides bullshit, to be quite honest with you.
Yeah.
There is kind of, it swings one way for a while and it can go back the other way, but it always kind of finds its equilibrium. That's because I think in this country we have people with, significantly diametrically opposed policy positions or views on life. But ultimately it gets whittled down because of our government, right? And people say, oh, Congress doesn't move fast, it doesn't do, and partially that's a benefit, because what in the Federalist Papers, I think it was Hamilton, that said that he differentiated between the House and the Senate. The House represents the fiery factions, and the Senate is there to debate and deliberate and slow things down.
Yeah, there was a lot of wisdom when they crafted our Constitution, that's for sure. I wonder what those guys would think if they saw the zaniness of today, though. Oh man, I bet they would be fired up.
And look, we as a country, we've well, at least Ronald Reagan, I'm a Reagan fan, his position was peace through strength in the world, and that's what we're attempting to do. We're still the greatest country in the world, right? But we achieve peace through our projection of strength around the globe, economically, militarily, everything.
No, you're right, Ryan. I think we're gonna have you come back again. Jack, you teed us up with another great one, and
Yes.
if I'm not mistaken, Adam, are you gone next week? I think you are.
Good question. I should know the answer to that, and I don't know.
I think
I'm
so.
out next week, so you guys.
You're
hopefully
out next
Adam is not.
week.
Yes, heading to the F1 race in Montreal. So yes.
Oh, that's right.
Yes.
Nice.
So, well then, if Adam's gone, then we're going to take a sabbatical, because I'm not going to be able to tee anything of substance up. I'm good at just teeing you guys up. So we'll stay tuned.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm in Michigan. That's correct. Yeah.
All right. Well, stay tuned. We'll figure out what week 210 is, whether it's next week or the following. So anyway, Ryan, thanks so much. And do tell Roger, hey, for me.
Will do. Thank you for having me, guys. This is great. And
Yeah.
as you guys come across different companies and business interests, look, we're always here to help them. We'd love to talk with other potential clients, because look, at the end of the day, I always tell people, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And we want to help companies be at the table.
That sounds great. Thank you again. Don't let the craziness, hit you over there. Be careful out there.
Yes. Thank you,
We
Ryan.
will. That's for sure.
Appreciate
All
you.
right. We'll see y'all. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right.
Bye-bye.
See ya. Thank you.